I'm sure you've heard about vulnerabilities before. There are loopholes in our smart contracts that allows attackers to steal fund from the smart contract or even ensure that it does not work as expected. If you're new around here, my name is Abolaji, and for more than 3 years now, I've been developing in the space. So let's look at liquidation vulnerabilities. Basically, liquidation means converting an asset to cash, and in the light of lending and borrowing protocol, this is quite important. So let's say you're building a lending and borrowing protocol, a DeFi protocol like Aave, Moonwell. By the way, if you have not watched my video on and you'd find me on Moonwell, please check the link to the video in the description below. So this is what your protocol basically does. You have a user that deposits, it can deposit a token. In this case, let's say Ethereum. It can deposit it as collateral in the protocol. So let's say it deposits one Ethereum, which at the time is doing that is 3,000 USDC. That's the price. Now, it would also be allowed to borrow against it. So let's say it borrows 1,500 USDC. The common thing is an invariant that these protocols do have, I'm sure. So you would have to implement such a thing in your protocol too. It may not necessarily be called health factor, but in this case, let's call it health factor. It's just to monitor the ratio of the collateral to the borrowed amount. So don't forget that the collateral itself, which is one Ethereum, changes in price with time, and the borrowed amount too would be accruing interest and the fees. One of the things you need to pay attention to is that when you're doing liquidation for this position, you have to collect the current fees. So if the fees in your protocol gets updated with time, you need to ensure that it's the current fees you're collecting. So basically, before I digress, it's just to calculate the health factor, just divide the collateral, the amount, the value of the collateral at that time by the borrowed amount plus the interest plus the fees. So the amount you're owing, that account is owing the protocol. So generally, the health factor would always be required to be more than one. So the invariant will be that the health factor of a user must always be more than 1.1. So this is just to ensure that your protocol remains solvent. All right. So now, after doing this, the health factor, you deposit 3,000 USDC worth of collateral, you borrow 1,500 USDC. The health factor will be 3,000 divided by 1,500, and it's 2. So basically, this is the summary of the user's details in the protocol. Now, there would always be also this state variable called is liquidatable, which can be true or false. Of course, because the health factor is more than 1.1, it will be false. So let's now go at some points in future and let's re-examine this. So at some points in the future, unfortunately, the price of one Ethereum has dropped to 1,870 USDC. So basically, the lending protocol will probably be using Oracle to monitor the price. That's one of the basic design pattern in the industry. You don't fetch price on chain, you fetch it off chain. All right. So now we have our borrowed amount. It still remains 1,500 USDC, and the interest. Now let's say this is after 3-4 months. The interest accumulated on this borrowed amount of 1,500 is 200 USDC. So the interest also includes the fees too. So in total, this user one is now owing 1,700 USDC to the protocol, and its collateral has dropped from 3,000 USDC now to 1,870. So if you do the calculation, the health factor has dropped to exactly 1.1. At this point, for this protocol to remain solvent, then liquidation has to take place. Liquidation means that the lending protocol has to immediately sell the collateral so that he can get back his money. All right. So now this liquidate function, it's what a liquidator will call to start the process of liquidation. So liquidator in this case are generally bots, normal people with bots. What they do is to keep monitoring this is liquidatable, um, variable for every user. So if it turns to true, then they quickly call this liquidate function. Once they do that, of course, they would also get reward for helping you to liquidate quickly a position that is becoming insolvent. So there are two ways to that many protocols um, use to liquidate a position. Now, the first one is the liquidator just calls this liquidate function, and this liquidate function sends the collateral directly to a DEX. It could be Uniswap, or it could also be other DEXs. In fact, you could have a DEX within your protocol. Then you sell it immediately. You get 1,870 USDC. Now, when you get that, now you send 50 USDC, for example, to the liquidator. That is a reward for helping you to call liquidate function immediately. Then you take 1,700 USDC that the person is owing the protocol. Then the 120 USDC left is transferred to the user one, right? So you do that. Another way you can implement this liquidate function is that the liquidator pays 1,820 USDC straight for this loan. He has paid, so the liquidator pays 1,820 USDC for this loan. And once it does the payments, then you pay, the protocol gives him one Ethereum, which worth 1,870 USDC. So he has just made 50 USDC for doing that. Then the protocol now takes 1,700 USDC from that 1,820 the liquidator has paid to the protocol. Then the remaining 120 is sent back to the user. All right. So those are the two ways protocol use to liquidate an insolvent position. Now, here is the vulnerability. What I've just described on this liquidate function is one transaction. So every step of this must get executed so that the position can be liquidated immediately and this invariant stays, it holds. Now, an attacker, this user can be an attacker, and he could, for example, or even if he's not an attacker, for one reason or the other, he could have gotten himself blacklisted on USDC. Now, there are many ERC20 tokens with strange features. One of it is blacklist function. So USDC and USDT have the power to blacklist an address, and once they blacklist an address, a transfer of USDC or USDT would not go on that address. So if this user is blacklisted, this 120 USDC you want to send back to him will not go. And once this transaction fails, everything fails, and this position becomes, it's no longer liquidatable, even though it's a losing position. So your invariant becomes broken. Your health factor for this user becomes lower than 1.1. And in some cases, it will even fall below 1. And there's nothing you can do. All right. So you need to pay attention to that. That's one. The second thing is, let's say other values apply, and in fact what you need to transfer here is not 120 USDC, it's just 0 USDC. or zero USDT, as the case could be. So you need to test and ensure that transferring zero value here would also be successful. All right, you need to test very well. Otherwise, this will keep failing and this position will not be liquidatable. So imagine if it drops as low as 1000 USDC, you'll just be carrying the collateral. There is nothing you can do. So that's so now the main way, and I need you to pay attention to this, to solve this problem is to use try and catch block. All right, try and catch block will ensure that once anything fails here, if this fails, you're able to catch the error and decide what next to do in that case. So if it fails, if 120 USDC transfer fails to this user, you can decide to keep his money in the protocol, and the other part of the transaction will be executed. All right. So these are things you need to pay attention to. Now, if you're building something like this and you want me to take a look at your code, please check the description below and you can book a call directly with me. And if your business is into integrating blockchain solutions, let me know, book a call with me, then we can take it from there. Thank you, and I'm going to see you guys on the next one. Cheers, bye.